Well, hello there. It's David Baer. Welcome to another wine conversation. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gone out to your local wine shop, had a great wine tasting there from a visiting winemaker or just the shop themselves, and thought, well, this is really cool. I want to do more of this. And then you go online and try to figure out where the heck you can find other wine tastings and wine events just like the one you experienced. Well, today's guest has the perfect answer for that question, and I'm really, really excited to introduce to you the founder of LocalWineEventscom. Welcome, Eric Orange. Eric, how are you?
Hi, David. I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, great, great. Hey, thanks so much for taking some time to join us here today. We're going to talk about local wine events a little bit and help folks out there understand what you can offer them, what your website offers them. I'm just going to go through, because you have some great facts about your site right on your site, and I wanted to just rattle some of this off because I think it's really impressive. You have nearly 500,000 local events that you have posted over the history of the site so far. Currently, or I guess on an regular basis, you have almost 5,000 events that people can find every day, and those are local events that are happening all over the world. And an amazingly high rate of viewership, 7 million plus page views each year. So clearly this is a site that people need to know about if they're looking to find local wine or food and wine events in their area. Can you tell us a little bit about how the site works, what people can expect to find there?
Well, it's food, wine, spirits, and beer related. We take anything that's in that realm. We'll have chocolate tastings. We'll have cheese samplings. We'll have cooking classes. You know, I call it wine because that was my background, but it is truly, you know, food, wine, spirits, and beer related events, all events. And the idea was to just put them in one place so people can find out what's going on in their area. You know, we have a Portland page, we have a Sydney page, we have London, New York, worldwide by city, specific to food, wine, spirits, and beer related events.
Great, great. I guess it started out as wine, because I remember when I first started using the site myself, I was hosting, you know, wine tastings and things back in the I guess it was the late '90s. When did the site start exactly?
2000 is when I started, and you were one of the early adopters, if you will.
I think we figured that out. You looked at my records and you said I was one of the very low numbers in all of your records. So
absolutely. I mean, you know, every new member gets assigned an ID in the database, and you know, we're up over almost 500,000 people who have joined over the years, and so I can tell from the ID number how soon somebody had joined me.
Yep. Okay, so you started the site out, and we'll go through a little bit of the history of how all of this came about. But you started the site out, and initially I saw lots of, you know, local wine events that were taking place in shops. Maybe some wine educators like myself at the time who were teaching a class here and there. What was happening initially on the site? Who was using it, and
well, it really kind of. It was the restaurants that really started picking up on it first, I think. They seemed to get it, I think, before anything else. I came from the background of the supplier side, wholesale side of the wine business, and my figuring in the beginning was that the wine manager at a wholesale house is the person who knows first and foremost when an event is going to go on, because typically you got a winemaker coming into town to do some ride with the people in trying to, and so I thought that from the wholesale side that would be where the real the real source of the postings, but getting those guys to post has been difficult even now. You know, I mean, they just don't seem to get it. But the restaurants, the majority of the small restaurants saw right away and started posting their events, and it took off.
Yeah, I think I see this all the time as well. I think there's an inherent challenge because the wholesale, the distributor is one step away from the end user, the consumer, and so it's always a challenge to get them to do the marketing because their job is ultimately to sell to a reseller.
Exactly.
And yeah, I found that in a lot of what I do as well. So I'm glad that you found the right end user for your platform, and clearly it's taken off because you know, you've morphed into so many other great things, including things like being able to sell access to events right on your site and more. We'll get into all of that, but I really want to back up first and talk about how you came to be doing this. Now, I asked you for a little bit of background on yourself, and I was surprised to discover that you initially worked at a winery not too far from where I grew up in the Hudson Valley of New York. So how did that all start out? How did you get into working at Milbrandt in Hudson Valley in the first place?
Well, I spent 4 years on a submarine in the Navy. I got out of the service. I really wasn't interested in government work. And I had a friend of mine who was going to the Culinary Institute of America up in Poughkeepsie, just up north of Poughkeepsie, Hyde Park. And he just said, come up here, you know, come visit me. And I joined him up in New York, we were just outside of Poughkeepsie, Wappinger Falls, if anyone knows where that is. And I was looking for work, and I was looking through the newspaper, and I found the job at Millbrook Vineyards. They had a position open. They had just opened up, I think maybe the year before. I think I was the third employee, and you know, I learned. It was interesting to me. I learned how to grow grapes. I learned how to make wine. The owner was a very nice man, John Dyson, who actually has gone on to, he owns Williams Sellium Vineyards and a number of others, but. He was great. Every time I asked a question, he would come in the next day with a book, and I learned how. You know, I just was, I kind of thought, I like wine. I like the idea of wine. I like the lifestyle of wine, and that was the start of it. I then went from there to selling wine, and I liked that as a career. I was happy selling wine. I ended up in Colorado working for Paterno Imports, and it was a great job. I mean, they paid for my car and my gas and my lodging, and I went to Steamboat and Telluride and Vail and Aspen, and I sold great wines. I mean, Paterno's book was a great line of wines, and I enjoyed it. I loved it. You know, one of the aspects of the job is to facilitate or present wine at dinners, and that was always a struggle. Sort of paradoxically, because to me, every time I was out in the market, I would meet people who would say, well, how can I find out about dinners or tastings? And yet, every time we put one on, I was having difficulty, you know, generating the interest, getting the marketing done. So the idea kind of popped up into my head at about the time the internet arrived. I thought, you know, here's a place. We can all put them in one place, and everybody can find them. And I did it. You know, it started off slow. My initial thought was to focus. I really felt my biggest struggle, and it is today, the biggest struggle is getting people to post their events. And so my original idea was to use a high-profile wine person in a city, and the person I picked, or my thought process at the time, was to get the wine buyer from Morton's in Chicago, because that's an important person in the wine buying world of any city. Yep. You know, Morton's sells a lot of wine, they buy a lot of wine. So if I could get that person, that wine buyer at that Morton's, to push the suppliers to post their events, I figured it would be easy. And as I said, I kind of started off that direction after I launched the site, and recognized right away, again, that the restaurants were all picking it up rather quickly. All I needed to do was let them know that it was there, and so that's what I did.
So how do you get the word out to restaurants?
Well, in the early days of the internet, before spam, I emailed. I would search the internet, and I would find email addresses, and I accumulated about 25,000 industry-related emails. And for several years, that's what I did. I sent it out, and it was, you know, it was pre-spam, and then spam came along and got worse and worse. But I wasn't really trying to sell breast enlargements or anything like that. I mean, and that's what the majority of spam was at the time. So, my
Viagra didn't even
rationale was,
exist
even
back
though
then.
I am kind of spamming, the fact is I was only telling them about my site, and only people who legitimately should have an interest in it.
Yeah.
But at one point it got to, I reached a point where I thought, okay, I collected your email address without asking you, so I'm going to give it up. And I sent an email and said, if you want to join me, here's my site, join. Otherwise, this will be the last email you hear. And I booted that 25,000 at that point, and started from there with just people who signed up on the site.
Yep. And now look at you, you're at 500,000 or thereabouts. So that's not too shabby. Yeah. So great beginning, or perhaps a challenging beginning, but you learned some lessons about where you were getting traction, and clearly the restaurants helped with that. So tell me a little bit more about sort of the development after that process. You got restaurants to start posting events on the site, and then you had the end user, the consumer, in the picture somewhere. How did they get into the picture, and how did they sort of get incorporated into the active use of your site at that point?
Well, I kind of followed, when I was in Denver. I was selling wine in Denver, and there was a new wine bar opened up, and almost any day of the week you went into that wine bar, you would find people in there from the industry. And I recognized that people within the industry are often a reference source for their friends. Do you know a good restaurant? Do you know what's a great wine? That kind of thing. And so I reckoned that if I could get the industry to use it and start building some database that way, I felt like the consumers would come. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, it got started. I started gaining some traction. But really what gave it the biggest boost was about 6 months in, U.S. News and World Report wrote about it. And it was at a time, again, early in the internet world, where everybody sort of started recognizing the value of links. And so U.S. News and World Report wrote to me and said, hey, we mentioned your site in an article, here's a link, because they wanted me to tell everybody about the link. And again, it was early. Everybody was still trying to figure out what worked in the internet and what didn't. And so, of course, I blasted out to everybody, hey, look, U.S. News and World Report, and it really spiked off from there. It gave the site, I think, legitimacy, because again, at that stage, early in that internet stage, there were a number of wine-related sites that popped up: Wine Shopper, Wine.com, Wine Access. I mean, I can't tell you how many there were, and the majority of those people had no knowledge really of the wine business. They just were wine drinkers who thought they had a good idea, and so they were going to become millionaires by opening a website. And so I really felt that my background in the industry and being mentioned in U.S. News and World Report gave the site some legitimacy that made a lot of the people in the industry take a second look and start recognizing, again, the simplicity of the idea was get them all together so people can find out what's going on, and we all benefit.
I think you also had the added advantage of, you just mentioned a bunch of other sites out there, all of which were about the commerce of wine, selling wine. You had nothing to sell, and so when people discovered your site, it was really a place for them to engage, discover more about an interest or a passion of theirs, or a budding interest of theirs, and there was nothing that they had to give you necessarily, and that I think probably helped you quite a bit, because while nothing is as free on the internet now as it was back then, there was so much stuff that was just free and readily available that people just jumped on. And
you're absolutely right. And by that same token, I believe that before links became what they were with Google. I mean, Google essentially grew because they added some value to the links that were pointing to a site. And because of as you point out, I wasn't trying to sell anything. All I was trying to do is let people know there was events going on. And because of that, I had a lot of wine-related sites linked to my site because I wasn't competition to them.
Mm-hmm.
They were happy to say, hey, by the way, here's events going on in the city. Almost any wine-related site out there would give me a link. So when Google came along and started applying some authenticity rating, page rank, if you will, to links, I was already in place with 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 links into my site. And that really was a big, strong plus as well. But again, that was primarily because I wasn't trying to sell anybody anything.
Yep.
I was
All
just
right, so here's the big question, and for those out there in the audience who are in business, they want to know, okay, well, great, you have the site, you're not selling anything. Of course, you have something to sell because you have to make money off of this. So how did you get through the initial phases of the monetization of all of this and get to a point where you were actually a real and hopefully profitable business sooner than later?
Well, it started primarily with advertising. That was sort of the end game for everybody back in those days. Figuring if you got a few 100,000 people looking at your site, then you could sell advertising and eyeballs and the whole thing. It started out Google's AdSense program, where they put ads on my site that were appropriate to my site. They spidered my site. They said, okay, this is a wine-related site, and then they recognized that this is a wine-related site that has Napa or Chicago or Dayton. And so they started feeding me ads that were not only appropriate for the wine-related themes, but also local ads as well. And that was a big boost. I mean, that's when the site really started paying for itself, was with the advertising from Google. And of course, I always had plans to sell my own advertising, not realizing how difficult it was to squeeze money out of wineries sometimes.
Yeah.
But then I developed the ticketing system, because a lot of people started asking me. I mean, I essentially had the posting there telling about an event. And somebody would write and say, how can I buy tickets to that event? I'm like, well, let me see. And, I set up.
So that came from the consumers who were saying they wanted the access? Or
Well, a little of both. I mean, I heard from restaurateurs who were posting their event and saying, hey, can I sell tickets? But I think it really stemmed more from consumers who were writing to me saying, hey, I saw this event. How do I get tickets to that event? And I would send them to the person who posted it. Again, recognizing, well, and in the earliest of days, too, I was told by an accountant that if I started selling tickets, I would have to 1099 every restaurant that I sold tickets for. Yeah. And I ended up, after a couple of years, I ended up in a conversation with an IRS agent who said, no, that's just your cost of doing business. You don't have to file a 1099 and all that. And that's when I said, well, okay then. At that point, I had already gotten to the point where I recognized there was need. And when she told me that I didn't have to do that, I immediately started to work on getting the system put in place.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. We talk a lot about wine on the show, obviously. It's called Wine Conversations, but there's so many aspects of wine, and very often there are, business considerations that are very, very real, just like the ones that you're raising here now. So fascinating to understand how this all came about, how you built it, and some of the decisions that you needed to make it profitable. Back in the early Google AdSense days, every blog and their mother was benefiting from that, and I think, as you pointed out, didn't realize how difficult or challenging getting out there and selling ads, whether it's to wineries or anybody, on your own might be. So you were able to, as many people were, able to leverage what Google's advertising infrastructure already had in place. Now, you were doing almost all of this on your own to begin with. So what happened?
Front page.
So how did you move from a one-man operation into at least what I see on your website currently is you have a team of several people who are working with you, and I imagine there's more who are probably not even mentioned on the site.
Well, I did do most of it myself. I spent the first probably 5 years. I learned HTML code. There were a couple of different programmers. One I think was called Dreamweaver, another was called Microsoft Front Page, which was, you know, a starter web design program. I had them both. I had always had a programmer. In fact, I started the site. I somehow came across a fellow, contacted a fellow in Slovenia who had who spoke very good English and was very intuitive. And so he's the one that built the initial launch of the site. You know, for $1,500, I went live with version 1. And you know, I used to say programmers have a shelf life of about 1.5 years before they sort of start burning out on a project. And I went through several programmers who, you know, it was all built on open source. You know, Microsoft, or not Microsoft, but MySQL. And so it was all, you know, I could get another guy to come in and figure out what had been going on, and it was really kind of a hodgepodge you know, during the first 5 years. And my fourth programmer vanished on me. Sort of just you know, just decided he didn't want to be a programmer anymore and left. And I was struggling. I mean, I realized at that point, hey, I'm making money every day right now while my site's up and running. And if it should crash, I don't have enough knowledge anymore. I mean, it quickly outpaced my programming knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I kind of went out for bid. I put an email out to my database. At that time, 30,000, 40,000 people that I had in my database. And I said, hey, I'm looking for a programmer. And I had just an immense response, not only from somebody themselves who got my email, but it was passed along to, you know, the niece or nephew or whoever, you know, friend of somebody else, and I had just a huge, massive response of people who were wanting to take a look at it, and I settled on a company that we essentially started from scratch. I mean, we took the structure of what I had and you know, built it as one piece instead of the sort of you know, horned-in program pieces that we developed over the years. And that's when it became a much bigger animal. You know, prior to that, again, I could do a lot of the work myself. I self-taught with the HTML and the code and SQL queries and all of that. I could maintain it, but it soon outpaced me after that. I couldn't any longer. And at that point, I then started developing. You know, I had a developer who came on board and became essentially as my partner, my business partner now. And then it got bigger and bigger. I picked up Jim Morris in Atlanta. I went to, there was a big event called Wine South. I don't know if you ever remember that, but it was.
That's not one I know.
Seems like they ran it for 3 or 4 years in Atlanta, and I went down there, and Jim Morris just introduced himself, and he was a copyright editor for CNN who had been laid off, and he started going through my site and showing me typos and copy errors, and you know, it just kind of, it worked into a job. I mean, I realized that I was not putting forth a very professional look because I didn't pay that much of attention. I mean, a lot of the site was sort of user-generated content that I just let them. If they didn't know how to spell, then you know, that's on them. He came along and kind of cleared all that up. And then, you know, with the social media, Facebook and Twitter and who knows what else, Pinterest and all of that. I mean, I need help with that. And then along comes Lee, and she's been a tremendous help. Fellow in Vancouver, Randy, just started posting events for me, just finding and posting events. He was an evening computer repair or support tech. Okay. And had time to kill in the evenings, and wine was a hobby, and so he discovered my site and started helping me just post events, and to him I'm grateful.
And so you have him, and then you have another regional editor as well. Is that out on the West Coast, or?
Yeah, Laura Bangford. She's been with me for a long time. In fact, I credit her with the size and strength of our Los Angeles page. Mm-hmm. She was actually a computer tech as well, who had a big interest in wine, and in fact was doing her own winemaking. when she came along, and she again she was in the market. She was in the market in the industry in LA, and just helped spread the word.
Yeah.
And before you know it, I mean, again, that LA got to be one of the strongest pages I've had because of her just continually being out there in the market.
So you also talked about the fact that you were able to send an email out to 30 or 40,000 people, reasonably early on in the process, and it speaks to the fact that you had, even at that early point, established a real community, and that's something that I think many websites, many businesses, strive to do. So clearly, you already had that in place. But I don't know exactly when in time this took place, but I would guess that sometime after that you started to add a regular email communication component to your business as well.
Yeah, so that was I was sending out the emails early, but the early goal with the emails was to drive traffic to the site, because traffic to the site is what drove the ads, and that's what was paying the bills. And so the initial version of the juice, if you will, was a text email with just links that said, you give the name of the event and a link to that event. It developed over the years. I started adding more and more information into the juice. Started calling it the juice. I actually got a trademark on that name. I couldn't believe nobody really had that at the time. Yeah. But I was able to get the trademark on the juice, and then transitioned into a full HTML, and it's just been kind of trying to build it up since. One of the things I should add, though, is keeping my email list clean. It's vital. I mean, I would have millions and millions of emails in my database right now if I didn't clean them out. But I pay attention to bounces. Every Tuesday when I send the juice, I'll have 5,000 bounce back emails. A lot of those will be out of office, on vacation kind of stuff. Yep. But there are, most of the major ISPs will let you know pretty clearly that an email is dead. Google, Yahoo, AOL, they will let you know that you're sending to a dead email, and you don't want to keep doing that if you for the long term, because that's one of what they use to call you to flag spam is continually, repeatedly sending emails to dead emails. So I have at this point almost 260,000 subscribers, and I'd be willing to bet that there's 257,000 of them that are getting my emails, because if it bounces, I clear them out quickly.
Now you started this back in 2000. Did you ever expect that your name was going to be showing up in that many email inboxes? I mean, I see your name I guess once a week for 2 different email lists that I'm on of yours. You're pretty famous to a lot of people.
No, it's funny. I just in the early days of the internet, it sort of, the idea was to make something big and let somebody buy it and move on. I always expected somebody to come along and purchase it. I had, the Wine Spectator came along a couple of different times, but he didn't really want to spend much money. He wanted to. And I say he, Marvin Shank. I mean,
I'd much rather open up an email from Eric than Marvin.
Well, but still, pick up the phone one day and having Marvin Shank on the line is pretty heady. I mean, that's like the Pope calling, in the wine world. It's like, whoa. Yeah. It was interesting. We almost had a deal, but he just didn't want to pay me what I thought it was worth, and it was at the point where, and I still am at the point where I don't have to sell it. The thing works. It worked well. It's great. It's a great thing, and I don't need to unload it. But when I started putting my name in there and then put my picture in there, and then walking in through some events sometimes and having people saying, "Hey, you're Eric Orange," and I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Right. But it's a little embarrassing sometimes, but it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah. And, well, you weren't ever in that position before to have the celebrity. You were always behind the scenes, whether you were working at a winery, whether you were in a submarine where nobody saw you, right. or dealing with the distribution of wine. You weren't on the floor of any of your team's customers selling the wine. So this is the first public profile, and you're in front of a lot of people. So
yeah, yeah, it is. It's out there a lot now.
So okay, so you're now about 15 years or so into this. What do you think that the future holds for LocalWineEvents.com? Are there plans for additional developments? Do you have new markets that you're going into? Where are you seeing trends taking you?
I keep growing it. I keep looking for more juice subscribers. I keep looking for more postings. I think that there isn't a day goes by that I don't come across events that should be on my site that aren't, and people that don't know about my site who should be. So I think that my battle continues is to just expand the knowledge that it's there. It's there for everybody to use, whether they're a consumer or a winery or a restaurant. They have the ability to find and participate in events. But I think I need to maybe branch out of the North America. I mean, even though we are a worldwide by city, it's still primarily North America centric. I do fairly well in England, but I think I need to get somebody on the ground probably in England. I need to get somebody on the ground in France. I need to, I mean, in order to really to go. But at the same time, I don't know if that's really the direction I want to go. I mean, I think that there's a lot of business out there still in this country.
Yeah.
So I'm really just still trying to grow it here and expand the knowledge of the site within the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've as Virginia Slim's ads used to say, you've come a long way. So that it's tremendous to see the growth of this site from the early days when I was one of the original users. I'm very proud of that fact. Thank you for sharing that with me, and to see what you've developed it into, and some of the continued growth. For somebody who is in that situation that I described at the beginning of our conversation, they're looking to just learn more, head out to events. You've seen all sizes and shapes of events out there. What sort of thing do you think you might say, hey, if you're just getting into wine in the first place, here's the type of event that you might find on the site that may benefit you?
Well, I think that any retail wine shop that is capable of doing tastings and putting those on a regular basis, even here in Pennsylvania, some of the wine stores have regular series of tastings on Friday afternoons. You can drop by and taste wines, Chardonnays from Australia or Nebbiolo from Italy. I mean, I think that really the key for most people is to try and taste as many different kinds of wines as they can, so they can sort of develop, figure out what they like, what tastes good to them, and certainly going to big events, the Boston Wine Expo, any of the major events that are out there, is a great way to expose yourself to a large number of wines at a relatively decent price that gives you a chance to really explore some of the options out there. The key is to take some notes, so that you can remember, or in today's world, snap pictures of the bottle. I mean, I think that's a huge advance. Being able to just take a picture of something you like, so that you can remember it later. I think is a real important advance that we've come up over the years. So, really, wine dinners themselves, that's where the magic happens. When it happens, as you know, food and wine pairing it can all be good, but there's times when it's magic. There's times when that flavor and that wine go together in such a way that sort of little light bulb goes off, and you recognize that that's really the art. And I think that those are important. I think to have that experience is important for somebody to understand. Now, in my experience, most of the wine dinners that you go to will have a pairing or two that will reach close to that point. Mm-hmm. To me, the real art is when all 5 courses match all 5 wines in such a way that you just every mouthful is magic.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen a few times when I was in Colorado. You know, there actually probably 5 times in my career that there was a chef who had that ability, who was able to taste that wine and create a menu in his head and or her head and put it together in such a way that it was magic. I think everybody needs to go out and try those wine dinners now and then to see if they can really reach that point.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There is magic, and for most of us, you know, wine is just an enjoyable, pleasant, refreshing beverage, and that's what it ought to be. But then there are those rare times when you have those opportunities to really, you know, have something a little bit more ethereal, and that's great. And where do you find out about those opportunities? Well, clearly you go to LocalWineEventscom to find them. So, hey, Eric Orange, thank you so very much for spending some time with us, for sharing the story of your site and of your career so far with our audience. I'm very, very excited that we had the chance to bring you on, and look forward to a chance to engage with you again. And for now, I just want to make sure that if those of you who have never been to Local Wine Events, you need to get over to the site, register, get signed up for the local Juice newsletter, and you know, follow up on some of those postings and go attend some events. So, hey, Eric, any last words?
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and you have a terrific day. And for those of you out there, we'll see you on the next Wine Conversations.